I just felt very misunderstood in the job interview situation. Like, I didn't really know how to kind of express myself kind of professional way. So I think that was kind of my disadvantage at that time.
Season 2, Episode 11. Hey everybody, it's Ben. A big, bright, neon hello to all the new listeners that have come to the podcast in the past couple weeks. I've heard from a good number of people who found the podcast as of Episode 10 of this season. That's when we talked to Tristan and got a lot of great feedback. Just in general, people really liked hearing the angle of a high school teacher who has Tourette syndrome. Again, that was Tristan, Episode 10 of Season 2. That was last week, in case you missed it. And if you're brand new to the podcast as of this week, then welcome. This is a podcast where my name is Ben. I'm somebody living with Tourette syndrome. This is where I have a conversation with somebody else out there in the world who also has Tourette syndrome. And we just talk about it simply, just to have the chance to do so. Because before this podcast, that never happened for me. And then incidentally, we collectively as listeners find all these eureka moments and things we have in common and things to relate to and so on, and ultimately, ideally, feel less isolated. Lots and lots of back episodes to check out, so subscribe in your podcast app. One thing I'm really liking is how people are saying they found the podcast, and what I mean by that is the actual way they became aware of its existence. Increasingly, according to the feedback from the Facebook group and from email, it's people just getting curious as to whether a podcast about Tourette syndrome exists, and then searching for the word Tourette or Tourette's on iTunes or in their podcast app on their phone, and then they find it. It comes up in the search results, and that's how they start listening, which is just really cool and how organic and self-propelled that is, if those words make any sense there. It just means people were looking for this kind of thing, and that's no small deal to me. Here's one reaction to the last episode, and this comes from Rebecca. She says, "Great episode. This week we told our son's class about Tourette's. We were so torn on whether to do it. It worked out well, so far. This episode confirmed a few things we were thinking in telling the class, so that's good. I love all the different guests and careers, etc. It's been encouraging. My husband somewhat self-diagnosed this year after our son was formally diagnosed. This has been a hard journey. And my husband worries that having a diagnosis will create a barrier for our boy. I think that's a normal fear, but it has really impacted how we go about helping our son. I appreciate all the perspective and hearing about experiences." End quote. So that's from Rebecca. And if any of you have any thoughts on integrating the awareness of TS into the classroom, or if you have experience with that or the social situations of youth, then please do weigh in. And you can do so in the Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook, which, by the way, as I speak, has just shy of 100 members, and I mean just shy. So all of you listening who haven't joined the discussion group, help us get past the 100 mark, and then keep piling on. It's really become a great extension of this podcast and just for straight talk about Tourette syndrome. And you can do so freely because it's a closed discussion group. That means you have to ask permission to join. So not everybody on the outside world just can automatically see what you're writing in there. So you have to ask permission to join and answer 3 questions about your connection to TS. That's sort of the gate you have to get to, and then you're in. Make sure you answer those questions because we do have a good number of people who've asked to join the group but haven't answered the questions. It's really easy to do so. It's not a burden. We just have to verify that you're a real person and a legitimate person to the discussion. Sophia is our discussion group admin. Please tell her thank you for the work she's doing there. Okay, so a few things to talk about real quick before we get to the conversation this week. First, I got to give a huge shout out to Eliana, who sent me one of the nicest and coolest messages I've ever received, to be honest. And I'm going to dedicate this episode to Eliana and her mom, Heather. We're definitely going to be talking in the future. Eliana, by the way, is 10 years old and has honestly a really, really good podcast voice. So yeah, you guys are going to hear from her at some point here. Also, some responses to Hilary, who wrote in from the last episode. You'll remember she's a teenager. She was diagnosed with TS and ADD, but she said she's having a hard time getting her parents to buy it. They haven't been all that supportive, according to what she was saying, and haven't really acknowledged the reality of her TS. She's also had kind of a tough time focusing in school, and so she brings home a lot of homework as a result. Again, something else her parents aren't really wanting to connect to TS or ADD. Maybe as an encouragement that she can overcome it or something, I don't really know, but she wanted advice. And here's a sampling of what you guys weighed in with. Chelsea says, Hilary, I empathize so much with your situation. I tried to educate my parents about ADHD and tics. They had also told me it's normal for everyone to have had a hard time focusing, sitting still, or ignoring impulses. Then I handed them a photocopied page from the DSM. My mom read it and said, oh, then this is normal for everyone in our family. It must be genetic. Chelsea goes on to say, as for the homework, if you go to your teachers and tell them you're struggling, they might be willing to help you. A first or second period study hall might relieve you of some of the pressure of having to finish everything at home the night before, and you can get some much needed sleep instead. If you're a caffeinated beverage drinker, get some caffeine and try tackling things first thing in the morning, rather than later at night after you're already too tired to focus. End quote. And that's Chelsea's advice to Hilary. Here's an email from Ed. He says, quote, I want to take a second to respond to Hilary's request for advice from the episode you released on November 9th. Being a teenager kind of sucks, even when you're not dealing with a neurological condition, and not having your parents on your side can make it a whole lot worse. I'd ask your parents why they don't believe the doctor's diagnoses, and what you can do to make them believe them. I have a feeling that the biggest problem with a Tourette's/ADD diagnosis isn't misdiagnosis, but non-diagnosis. You never hear, well, we thought it was Tourette syndrome, but it turned out to be cholera. It's always more along the lines of, I wasn't diagnosed until I was 30 and I suffered quietly the whole time. If the doc said you have it, you have it. I'd try to mention to your folks that the visions of Tourette syndrome and ADD they have in their heads don't match the reality of living with the conditions. Ask them to do a little research on their own so they can start to line up your experiences and symptoms with those of an actual TS patient. Ed goes on to say, finally, and I know this isn't high on your list, maybe cut them some slack. It's not easy for a parent to learn that their kid, who I'm sure they love, is suffering from an invisible neurological condition or two. It's not an okay reaction, but they might be finding it easier to deny that you're a TS/ADD patient than it is to deal with the reality of it. If they don't come around or you have to go it alone, remember that there's an active and vibrant community of TS patients online who are ready to support you. While having a great support network in the real world is helpful, it doesn't change the fact that when you have a condition like TS, you're effectively going it alone in your head every second of every day. Be strong and be proud of the fact that you're getting baller grades while dealing with TS and ADD. End quote. And that's from Ed, who actually does a really great blog about his experiences with TS. edstourettes.blogspot.com is the address for that. Y'all, thank you for responding to Hilary. I did get a few more responses, but instead of reading them here, I'm just going to send them directly to her in the interest of time. I got one more thing to read that I found interesting, and it's for everyone who, and this is a lot of you, it turns out, it's for everyone who has the ear-popping tic. Yes, the ear-popping tic. You know, I've said a couple times, at least on here, that I'm worried that it's doing damage to my hearing. Just popping my left ear a couple thousand times a day. Well, here's an email I got from Cam, who says, the reason I'm writing you is because of the ear tic that you mentioned on the last podcast. If I understand correctly, the tic that you're worried will lead to hearing damage involves using the muscle that makes your ears pop or click when you're on airplanes or swimming, which also happens to be one of my most common tics. I'm not a doctor. Okay, and popping in real quick just for disclaimer's sake, let me read that again. Cam says, I'm not a doctor, but I wanted to let you know that as far as I'm aware, there's no risk of damaging your hearing performing that tic. I'm an experienced free diver and scuba diver, and you use this muscle to perform hands-free equalization, which is something of a revered skill amongst divers, because it's not that easy to do unless you spend a lot of time exercising the muscle involved. And I'm going to butcher the name of this muscle, the salpingopharyngeus. I'm not going to try to pronounce that again. What you're doing is not putting pressure on your eardrum. It's opening your eustachian tubes, which actually relieves pressure. What I think you're confusing this with is a form of hearing damage that can be caused by repeated or extended pressure, positive or negative, on the eardrum, which can cause the eardrum to stretch over time. As a side note, this is the cause of Adam Savage's hearing loss. So not to worry. All you're really doing is preparing for your unexpected new career as a free diver with a very specific party trick. End quote. And that's from Cam, who I can thank for putting my mind at ease right now, because my ear-popping tic is like, I don't know, Keith Moon's crazy drum blast in that song Cobwebs and Strange by The Who. Just look that up for it to make sense. Again, going back to what Cam said about not being a doctor, if you do feel like you have something to see the doctor over, definitely go see the doctor. I definitely did a while back, and my ears were okay. Again, just saying that because this is not a medical advice show, just a show where we talk about our experiences. And now I can't get that Who song out of my head. Speaking of music, on this episode, we've got Simon, who it turns out I have a lot in common with. We both record music. That's a big part of both our lives. We're both involved with multimedia. You'll hear about it. We talk a lot about it. But, he also works for a large nonprofit, as I do in my private life. And in Simon's case, it's Tourette Canada, which has been a huge support for this podcast. So Simon does communications work at Tourette Canada. And yes, that means he works alongside Melissa Seawater, who was individually an enormous part of this show, episode 3, season 1. That was a really early turning point for the Tourette's podcast, you could say. Just a really powerful conversation I had with her that affected me in a lot of really unforgettable ways. So, Simon, if you're listening, solid coworker you have there in Melissa. Simon, like Melissa, was also on an episode of the TV show Employable Me. We talk about that and a lot more. Here's me and Simon. Could you state your name and your sort of general age bracket, the general part of the world that you live in, and what you do, just how you would describe yourself?
So my name's Simon. I am 24, and I live in Toronto, like suburbs sort of outside of Toronto, like a little kind of mini city outside of Toronto called Oakville. And I work actually as in the communications aspect, in the communications capacity, for Tourette Canada, which is the Tourette syndrome advocating organization in Canada, the only like major one. And I play music. I play guitar, and I write my own music and play whenever I can. I go Toronto's. I don't know if you probably know that Toronto's kind of becoming a big music scene and one of the popular music cities in the world.
Right.
So I go to a lot of shows in Toronto, and I have a lot of friends sort of in the scene and in different bands and stuff. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. It's funny. I mean, you're really similar to me in that in my day job, I do the same thing. I work in advocacy and communications for a fairly large nonprofit, and I have a music background. And I mean, have you done live music, gigging, touring, anything like that, or?
Yeah, like I haven't done any touring really, but Ben, right? Yeah, in the show. Yeah. It's Twitch. Like I haven't done a lot of like big touring, but I have. I kind of play whenever I can. Kind of pop-up opportunities that kind of happen around the city. Like I've played a bunch of open mics. There's a few venues in Oakville actually that I frequent. There's one actually pretty close to me called the Moonshine Cafe. Yeah. It's a really kind of like nurturing venue for upcoming musicians and songwriters.
Nice.
And they do like an open stage every Tuesday night, which I used to go to. I don't really do it anymore, but so I do that, and I've every once in a while when like a show comes up, when a friend kind of wants me to kind of open for them or something, I don't say no to that. And
nice.
I've actually through Tourette Canada, the Montreal unit did a fundraiser a couple years ago in Montreal for Tourette's, and one of my friends, who's actually a mutual friend of Melissa, was the organizer of this fundraiser, and it was like a benefit concert, so she got a local kind of like semi-popular Montreal band to open and to headline, and she invited me to come down and open for them.
Nice.
So that was like my biggest kind of like opportunity so far. I played about 45 minutes set because one of the other acts that was supposed to be scheduled for that night wasn't able to show up, so I have to play longer, which is cool. Started going under the moniker Jimmy Humbucker, which is my stage name.
Jimmy Humbucker?
Jimmy Humbucker, yeah.
Where'd you get that from?
I get that a lot, actually. People asking me that. I was named after my mother's younger brother, who was actually his nickname was Jimmy. So that's where I got that. And humbucker, you know what a humbucker is? It's like a pickup on a guitar, right? So
yeah, guitar pickup.
Yeah, so that's kind of stuck. And now I've kind of added the part at the end, Jimmy Humbucker and the Revolution. So
Jimmy Humbucker and the Revolution.
So that's kind of like where we're at now.
Nice.
This morning I actually just published on SoundCloud a new song that I like finished like a week ago. I finished recording it a week ago. So
It's on SoundCloud. So do you record everything yourself?
Yeah, I try to record as much as I can, and I haven't actually the one that I just did, this one that I just released this morning, was the first kind of like new song that completely new material that I've recorded in at least over 5 years because
oh wow,
because I haven't really done much on my own in terms of recording because like I was away at school for a few years. I studied communications in school, so I really had no time for music. But I also, but yeah, I do record a bunch of my own stuff, and I collaborate with people too. A lot of the stuff that I've done when I was younger, I did kind of off my own laptop. But in recent years, I've kind of done it through more professional means, sort of like other friends' studios and stuff.
So you went to school for communications. Can you kind of describe what you do in your role with Tourette Canada?
So with Tourette Canada, I basically so I went to school for communications, and it was a really general program, and studied like everything from like web design to like videography, kind of like a jack of all trades in the media kind of world, sort of. So in Tourette Canada, what I do is I have access to their website. I have admin access to their website, so I update their website whenever it needs updating. And I also right now we're working on every month we publish a monthly newsletter, and that's kind of one of my big projects that I do every month as I kind of design the newsletter and get all the content together for it. And I also help with their social media. Me and Melissa actually work together collaboratively on their social media. We manage like their like most of their chapter pages and their main kind of national page on Twitter and Facebook. And what else do I do? So have you heard of Trek for Tourette?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's like their national fundraiser in Canada. And so I've helped kind of. I haven't really organized it, but I started. Like I've been going for years because it's in their 10th year now. So when I was younger, I always went. But I started in January in the role, and so I helped with them with their 10th anniversary. What that means basically is I just kind of like collaborated with like all the coordinators and kind of like managed kind of like email communication with them. Whenever there was a big kind of communication that my boss wanted sent out, I basically just made a mass email to all of them. And I also like helped I was there the day of, so I helped volunteer at the event the actual day of, but it's kind of like all over the place. There's not just one single place where it is. Like every kind of like region in Canada that is signed up with Tourette Canada has their own Trek for Tourette.
Yeah, and could you quickly explain what Trek for Tourette is for people who don't know?
So of course, Trek for Tourette is basically our national fundraiser for Tourette Canada, and what we do is we walk 5 kilometers, and it's like a walking 5K thing, and basically you raise money to sign up to be able to walk. You have to like register and donate money, and all the donations go to Tourette Canada for our in-service programs and other like community initiatives we run to support the community with Tourette's in Canada.
Nice.
Yeah.
So are you also doing, you mentioned videography and other multimedia. Are you kind of incorporating all that together with your role with Tourette Canada?
So I haven't really done too many videos for them, but on my own time, I kind of dabble in videography. Like, I not professionally really. I just kind of like make videos whenever kind of I think I get like a really good idea for a video. So like, recently, like in January, I actually edited together like a 15-minute movie of my family ski vacation in over Christmas. We do like every year we do like we go out to BC, British Columbia, and we go into one of the ski resorts, and kind of like a group of us, like my immediate family and close friends and close family members and friends. So I basically cut together a movie of that, and I haven't really done a lot of videography in my life. Mainly just kind of like kind of like side kind of personal projects like that. Like right now, I'm kind of, my dad just had a giant 50th birthday party at our cottage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm putting together sort of like a picture slideshow on iMovie of that.
Oh, cool.
So
earlier, you when we were talking about music, you had mentioned the gig you played and how you mentioned the name Melissa. So I guess that's got to be YouTube Tourette celebrity Melissa C. Water, right?
Melissa C. Water, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So you work with her?
Yeah, we worked together. I actually met Melissa a few years ago. When I finished school, I wanted to meet. It was kind of my goal to kind of meet people with Tourette's. When I was younger, my parents, after I was diagnosed, my parents kind of got me involved in the community a bit. But then after a while, I kind of dispersed myself from that community, and it had been at least, I went through high school and university really without knowing anyone with Tourette's.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to kind of like get back into that community after school, and so in my last semester, I signed up for the virtual group that Melissa runs. And met a whole bunch of people that way. I met Christine Picking Out Loud and Melissa that way.
Yeah.
And that's how I got involved with Employable Me. And basically, that's how I got the role I'm in today. Which is kind of cool. I met my boss through that group.
So you were in an episode of Employable Me as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about that. How were you approached, or how did all that come together? What was your experience like with it?
So actually, Melissa was the one that told me that they were looking for someone with Tourette's because they had already cast her at the time, so they were looking for someone else. So they found me, and I got a call in December of 2016, and then and so she said basically once the call wrapped up, I signed on board, and then they did the shooting in March. I had just come back from England at the time from a family vacation. And March and April, and basically what they shot was basically my family life. Like they came to my house actually a few times and did like entire days of shooting only exclusively in Oakville, which was pretty cool. They got my mom. I was like kind of like a key player in my episode. So my mom actually shows up a lot in my episode. And so my mom, it's like they kind of like got me playing with my dog and like me talking with my mom about my Tourette's. And at the time I was still looking for like a job because I didn't really have any like real job at the time. So like anything full time or.
And real quick, the premise of the show is that they're taking people who have what is perceived to be some sort of barrier or disability or some sort of issue that may stand in the way between them and employment. And so you were looking for a job. So what was your Tourette syndrome or your tics? Were they really a barrier for you?
To be honest, my barrier was not really the Tourette itself. It was more of the comorbidities.
Yeah.
Because I identify with the TS plus community. I have more of the anxiety and the OCD and the ADHD as well. And those kind of pose more of a daily problem for me than the Tourette itself. Actually.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of where I was coming from, and I just felt very misunderstood in a lot of like the job interview situation. Like I didn't really know how to kind of express myself in terms of like kind of like disclose any part of my disability. I didn't really know how to do that in a kind of professional way.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of my disadvantage at that time. So they shot me in my house, and they also. They had me actually do a mock kind of day on the job at a music store, which is kind of cool.
Nice, yeah.
They had me work with customers, which kind of wasn't really my strong suit, and still isn't really. And well, what they did do actually for me was they actually at the end of my episode they had a little sequence where I was interviewed by a publisher, kind of like east of Toronto. And I actually ended up getting a summer placement there. So after the show ended, I actually worked at that publisher for the summer, and it was called BCS Communications Group. Yeah, they do like magazines in like the healthcare industry and stuff, and so I was able to write some articles for them and
nice.
Like do like journalistic stuff, and I got a few articles actually published in their magazines. And after the placement ended, they kept me on as a freelance writer for a bit.
Cool.
So I actually coordinated an interview with a disabled musician locally, and actually got that article published, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
So that was like in November of 2016, and then in December was when I got the call to come work for Tourette Canada.
Oh, that is great.
So I started like right after my family vacation, my ski family vacation. I started like the first week of January, and I've been there ever since.
So you were benefited. Was the episode itself, did you feel like it was a fair portrayal? Because, obviously one of the complaints that the Tourette community has is when they're portrayed on TV, it's usually sensationalized or made into some sort of depressing, sad kind of situation. How'd you feel about the episode?
I feel like, honestly, I get all their complaints, and I understand all the kind of flack that show's been getting from the community.
Mm-hmm.
I think the director I worked with really wanted to kind of portray like my story as like sort of one of the success stories, and I think that's kind of really what came across in the episode and the final product.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a way, like in a positive light, it kind of made my story seem like one of the more hopeful ones, but it also kind of glorified my situation a bit.
Okay.
I think they really glorified my situation a bit too much in a way. At the end of one of my episodes, I'm going to give you kind of a specific example. At the end of my episode, they basically left it. My episode ends basically with, I'm going to spoil it a bit here, but the end of my episode ends with the sequence where I get the job with the publisher, and basically there's another person in the episode who got the job as well at the end of her episode. But in her side of the story, they said that they didn't keep her on, because like she was kind of failing on her duties, or I don't remember why, but with me, they basically just ended it without saying that anything happened. Like they ended it with the assumption, they ended up giving people the assumption that I'm still there.
Gotcha.
Which isn't true.
Okay.
So and in fact, by the time the episode aired, I had already left. So, because I didn't leave. My term had ended.
Yeah.
It was a contract position, so my internship had ended. So.
Okay.
So they kind of made me seem like kind of like, I don't know. I guess that's kind of my opinion, at least, of how it went. But beyond that sort of thing, I think basically how they portrayed me was kind of how I wanted, anyways. Beyond what I just said, I really have no problem with my episode.
And so, with portrayals, did they, play up your tics? And actually, let's just go ahead and talk about your tics and sort of your background, and maybe we can work back up. When were you diagnosed? When did you start exhibiting tics? And what did your parents notice and all that? What's the early story here?
So I was diagnosed when I was in grade 8. And I think my parents started noticing my tics around the time I was 6 years old. Mm-hmm. So in grade 8, I was like, it was a few years after I started. I was diagnosed a few years after I started displaying symptoms, but I started as early as 6 displaying symptoms. And I think back then it was really just like really simple ones, I wrote these in my notes actually. Basically just like really simple ones like facial grimacing and jumping. I did a lot. Do you know what a tuck jump is?
A punk jump?
Like in gym, tuck jump.
Oh.
Like in gyms?
Yeah.
You know, like when like when you jump so high that you scrunch your knees up to you and then you come back down. You do it really fast.
That was one of your tics?
I did that a lot. Yeah, that was one of my tics. I did it a lot.
Huh.
I remember it so well because I got so tired after I did it.
Yeah. Wow.
So tired. My first those are some of my first few tics. Yeah, my mom started noticing it a lot when I was playing soccer, because I've never been really a sports person. But when I was younger, my parents tried to get me into sports in the first little bit of my life, but they quickly realized that wasn't my thing. So they took me out right away, and so I've been music ever since. But I did play sports for a while when I was younger, and so mainly jerking my knee and kind of like jerking my head back and like my neck and all that. So that's kind of like the sort of like common ones that's how I started.
when you were, so are you saying that tics interfered with your ability to play soccer, even beyond the level of interest you had in it to begin with, or?
Well, yeah, like I guess like because like when I was kicking a lot on the field back when I was playing soccer, I wasn't really like involved in the game. I kind of went off and did my own thing because the tics were so intense back then that got really tiring.
Yeah.
Like soccer is a tiring sport, right? Because you're running around all the time chasing after a ball and you get really sweaty.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really want to invest any more energy in the game itself because my tics were kind of taking up so much energy out of me.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
so
I understand now.
That's partly why they kind of took me out, because my tics would really take over back then. Like I play sports. I don't play sports, competitively. I never have, but I kind of like throw a basketball around and hang. My brother is a really competitive hockey player, so I play with him kind of casually and stuff. He plays basketball too and stuff. Mm-hmm. So my tics were. My tics used to be like super bad. They used to take over my ability to enjoy the sport.
Yeah.
They're not that bad anymore, but they still take a lot out of me. So yeah.
So when you were diagnosed, what were the marching orders at that point? Did you try medication? Did you try to kind of go on without it and find a way to kind of accept your tics and integrate them into your life? Or what'd you do?
I was diagnosed. After I was diagnosed, they kind of gave me clonidine to start.
Yeah.
Which didn't really help too much because when I was in
same here.
Yeah, because when I was right after high school started, I started regular with a new psychiatrist, and he put me on the risperidone. So that kind of helped a bit more, and I'm still on it to this day. So that helped a lot. So yeah, basically they didn't I never did any CBIT or anything. Basically, it was just medication. After I was diagnosed, that's kind of how they treated it.
Yeah.
So risperidone was the one that he put me on after clonidine,
mm-hmm.
and I'm still on it. But I also take co-sertraline for my OCD. SSRI.
Okay, gotcha. So
yeah.
Medication kind of doing you well. Are you dealing with side effects or anything like that? That with me, side effects were kind of the killer, and I had to get off the medication just because it was better to be off it than on. But are you experiencing any difficulties with that, or?
Well, to be honest, I've kind of always been experiencing side effects from the medication. It's just kind of a part of my life now because in a way, like obviously I'm not off the medication yet because it's helping me.
Yeah.
Like it's always been helping me because I've tried over the years, the last couple of years actually, trying to kind of like lower it. And every time I lower it, my tics get worse. So I know that it is helping me. The risperidone, at least, I've never changed my dosage of the sertraline. So the risperidone I've tried kind of decrease a bit, and it's always gotten worse. So I know it's helping me. But yes, I do get a lot of side effects from the risperidone. Like for example, I'm tired a lot.
Yeah.
Like I get super tired. Like pretty much every day I'm like super tired. Pretty much every day after, like anytime after 4 p.m. it's kind of when I get like really kind of groggy and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like part of my normal life now. And it's something I just kind of, for some reason, I feel like something I just kind of have to accept because the medication is helping. And what I do to kind of combat the kind of drowsiness is I work out a lot. So
yeah. So you mentioned that your parents kind of got you into the community. I mean, obviously that has to be a positive. Could you talk about sort of the benefits you've gotten just from interacting with other people who have Tourette syndrome?
Well, actually, it's funny you say that because my parents got me into the community at first, but then they they were kind of like the reason that I kind of stopped, kind of like going down that path. But I kind of went back into I kind of voluntarily decided to come back into the community myself. Just kind of as a pre-context. But yeah, you're right. They did kind of start me in the community, of course. Basically, interacting with Melissa and everyone in the virtual group has been really a game changer for me. It's been really amazing. They're now, all of them in the group are like really close friends of mine, Melissa and my other friend, at least, who did the fundraiser. in Montreal. They're two really close friends of mine. Like I talk to them every day. And it's really nice to have someone, like a really close friend that knows exactly what you're going through.
Absolutely.
And because I even to this day, I have really bad anxiety attacks sometimes at work, like during the day, and like really bad OCD. And I talk to Melissa constantly about it. And I talk to her, and she more than often talks me through most of it, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. Having somebody there to kind of pull you through. Yeah.
To know that someone like, to know there's someone that's not my parents that I can actually talk to about it, which is nice.
Yeah. Do you talk with other people who in your life who don't have Tourette syndrome? I mean, have you been kind of socially open about it, or is it the kind of thing you typically don't talk about with other people?
No, I actually, a lot of my friends actually know about that I have Tourette's. Like I have a really, like a bunch of my really close friends from high school and university kind of know about it, but we don't actually really talk about it openly in different conversations.
Yeah.
Like Tourette's is obviously a very like physical condition, right? Like you can see it, right? So like when I took a lot, and so that beyond kind of like, you know, when I'm out with friends and it's kind of like noticeable, they obviously, you know, they acknowledge it and they want to know if I'm okay and stuff, but beyond that we don't really kind of like talk too much about it. There are a few friends in my life though that kind of wanted to know more about it, so I would spend more time kind of teaching them about it, sort of, so to speak, like telling them like reasons why I take and stuff.
Yeah.
But besides those few friends, there hasn't really been too much interest in my outer Tourette circles about it, besides like family friends and stuff.
Yeah. How do you tell them what it is? How do you explain it? That's one question I get a lot from email is, you know, parents of kids who have Tourette syndrome or people who have it themselves. They're kind of getting eager to talk to other people about it, but they're not really sure. You know, they want to find the least awkward way of bringing it up or the best, most streamlined way of explaining it without it kind of running off into a misunderstanding. How do you do that?
You know what? To be honest, I don't really know how I do it because there's so many. There's so much. It really kind of depends on the moment and the situation that I'm in.
Yeah.
My mom actually is someone who asks a lot about it. She's the one who asks me the most about what goes through my head when I tic or when I OCD or something, when I have a compulsion, obsession or compulsion. So basically, what I'll give you the example of my mom. Just to keep it sort of simple.
Sure.
Whenever I'm going through like an obsession or a compulsion, my mom asks me like, what's going through your head? So I try and kind of like, sorry, I'm talking really fast.
No, go for it.
If I'm talking too fast, you can tell me to slow down.
No way. No, go for it.
I just tell my mom kind of like what's going through my head. Like, you know, like if I have like an obsession, I just kind of tell her like why I'm obsessing about it and stuff. When it comes to other friends, really, it's basically like I get a lot of the questions I get is basically like kind of like what makes you tick, like what environments kind of like make you tick the most. And so I tell them really it's really just social situations when you're out in crowds and stuff, and when there's a lot of excitement and like a lot of stimuli happening around you, it kind of makes me tick the most. So I just kind of explain it basically from what I know, from what I've always known about it. Like obviously it's not really, like, to be frank, it's not really the most like known about condition in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of just tell them like what I know and from kind of like what I experienced from like what I've learned from personal experience, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to do it is to personalize it and kind of take just like you said, Tourette syndrome, there's a lot of mystery.
Yeah.
I can't explain a lot about myself, but usually I just have to kind of explain my experiences and you know, if you notice this thing about me, it, you know, it has nothing to do with anything except for this. I have Tourette syndrome and I simply cannot help it. My tics are a mystery to me. I don't know how they pop up or what shapes them or what influences, you know, why I'm going to be ticking a certain way at any certain time of day. I know when, you know, what may quote unquote trigger it, you know, stressful situations, but also situations where I'm really stimulated and looking at something that I'm interested in. And this is, I guess, the testimony of people in my life who've told me when I seem to tick most. But I mean, so the anxiety, I mean, does that kind of, the circle that I hear a lot is when people have Tourette syndrome and they have anxiety issues, stress or anxiety triggers their tics. Their tics make them more self-aware. And then it kind of circles back into, okay, I'm kind of getting anxious because I'm in public and I'm ticking, and that's going to make me tick more. Do you have any methods in your life of kind of diffusing the tics or making them less severe or less of a thing in the public space? Or
yeah, like, I mean, I totally get that kind of mentality that people have, that the anxiety kind of like what you said, like when they tick more in public, and so the anxiety worsens because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it must happen to me. I just probably don't really think about it too consciously.
Yeah.
Because when I'm ticking in public, then it's just kind of, I'm ticking and it's kind of a normal thing. But yeah. Beyond that, so yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there about how like ticking more in public will make you more anxious because you're more aware of your tics and you're more aware that people will kind of see your tics. I actually find that my OCD kind of is kind of a driving factor behind most of my tics. Like a compulsion I will do, like there are some compulsions that I do that are so quick that it kind of feels like a tic in a way. Like I do a lot of stuff on my computer. I do a lot, like there are, when you're on your computer, there's 100 million ways to do the same thing. Like uploading an image from something as simple as like uploading an image to creating an image even. There's so many different ways to do the same thing. So I find myself doing a lot of repetitive tasks on my computer. Yeah. But I mean, like it's so like quick that in some ways it feels like a tick. And I feel like if I just do a general kind of like motor tick or something, then it kind of sort of satisfies the compulsion in a way. So I can kind of relate to it in that sense. Yeah. But when I'm with my boss, even sometimes like when she's telling me something that I need to do, like a task for work, that's something I really need to focus on. And that kind of makes my tics come out more, but it also kind of makes me aware that if I tick more, then I might lose focus about what you say. And so that will make me more anxious. So it's kind of like a cycle. So that's kind of the personal experience kind of I can give you that kind of speaks towards your point, I guess. And if that does.
Absolutely. And music is obviously therapeutic for you. I mean, it certainly is for me, and I think it is for kind of everybody. But from a creator standpoint, is that something that you find helps you? Yeah,
I guess kind of subconsciously, music has always been there for me. So it's something I kind of, in a way, take for granted. So yeah, the idea of creating something will calm me for sure. Like it's kind of like, it's just something that I just love to do. Yeah. So like even now, like if I'm home, like, and I just don't have any obligations for work or any tasks, pertinent tasks to do around the house or for work, my mind will instantly flip to, I just want to create something. Yeah. So I'll just do that. And that will kind of make me really excited. But I know that for some people, getting really excited makes the tics happen more. Yeah. And it does for me too. When I get excited about creating something, I obviously tick more. But it kind of like soothes me in the fact that like I'm not going to have to worry about other things. That makes sense.
Yeah. And, with me, I guess when I'm either listening to music or creating music, I would say 75%, if not 100% of my time, music interacts with it one way or another. But when I'm kind of like in the heat of it, if I am ticking, I don't really notice it. It doesn't really bother me. I will say that there is one tic that I have, and I've talked about on the show a number of times, my ear popping tic, which drives me crazy. I've noticed that when I'm actually, and I don't think I've even really come conscious of this until now, so I hope I'm not spoiling it for myself, but when I'm listening to music or making music or something I'm a sound that I'm concentrating on, I'm not ticking that way. I don't do the ear popping tic. And I feel like I would notice it if I did, because that would affect my listening experience. It's usually when I'm, laying in bed or I'm typing something at work, or it just starts up and I can't control it. I can't control the duration of it. But there are these weird moments where I am, hyper focused on sound and production and EQ and, what happens if I turn the knob this way. I'm not ticking like that at all. Or if I'm just enjoying myself listening to music.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hugely therapeutic. And it's surprising what music can do.
I really understand where you're coming from. I don't think I've ever kind of like felt that really hyper focused kind of like moment where I'm not ticking.
Yeah.
And like I probably have, just really haven't really thought consciously about it ever. I know that when my mind is kind of switched over to the creative mode and I want to create something, I kind of get really OCD because I want it to be perfect.
Me too.
So
yeah.
that in a way that kind of counteracts the point of the whole point of it being therapeutic for me.
Yep.
But once I kind of get into it and kind of get into the heat of it, as you say, then I guess I've felt that before. I just kind of haven't really ever thought consciously about it. So it's funny that you mentioned it because it's kind of like shedding light on some of the things for me.
So yeah, when you say you get kind of OCD about it, I do too. I don't necessarily. Yeah. I am definitely, I would say, obsessive. I don't know if I would say necessarily compulsive in the way that fits the OCD definition, but when I am recording something,
and anxious adrenaline in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? I get excited about the completion of it, but I don't want to get to the finish line without looking back and seeing something totally perfect behind me. But when I'm recording music, or if I'm even doing this podcast, for example, I definitely spend time trying to make sure the audio sounds good and to make sure the caller sounds good. And there are a million different ways I could do that. But when I get to it and then I put the episode out and I listen to it, it'll totally bug me if I hear like a little bit of hiss or, just something that's out of place or something that shouldn't be there or something I forgot to do. And I torture myself over that. And I do the same thing with music. And one thing that's really kind of helped me is to give myself less time to do it. So I aim for the high points and I kind of give myself a very quick deadline. So, and I guess the principle is called Parkinson's Law, where I think generally what Parkinson's Law means, and I hope I say this right, is that your work fills out the time that you've given yourself to do it, or the time that you're allocated to do it. So if you have a short amount of time, even if it's a big project, you'll kind of go for the high points of it versus kind of spending too much time laboring over the little small details. And in the end, sometimes you have a better product by laboring less over it because you've kind of gone for the big wins and you know what matters, and your kind of brain goes into emergency mode and wants to and that's been sort of my only sort of saving grace. And I do that at work too. I don't count it as procrastination. I think I'm working smarter instead of harder. And that's the one way that I've been able to get around that and feel a little bit better about it. And I guess with music, it helps that I also love these sort of garagey kind of trashy production sound. So I don't necessarily with music have to, even though I do record stuff that I do spend a lot of time with, and I do want to make it sort of studio quality professional, like anything you'd hear on the radio. I prefer the sound that has sort of artifacts in it that sound kind of like they're cheaply recorded, but they have a lot of character. And, like back in the 1960s, the way stuff sounded back then, it has texture and grit, and it doesn't sound like anything on the radio today because they're not recording with the same kind of equipment, the same techniques or anything like that. It's just, but it still sounds amazing.
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of my stuff sounds very garagey and sort of trashy too.
I love it.
Like really raw, sort of like guitar stuff. That's a lot of my stuff too.
Oh, that's my favorite.
A lot of the more like rocky stuff I do, but I also do a lot of acoustic stuff too.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot more not Celtic-y sounding stuff now, but I've got a lot more like acoustic sounds in my work.
Yeah.
Now and like the one I recently just put out actually has two kind of acoustic tracks on it, but it also has like a more garagey kind of electric sound over top of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes it sound sort of like a garagey sounding song, but with like an acoustic kind of like undertone to it, which
That's
is kind
cool.
Which is kind of cool. It's kind of a new sound I've kind of like I kind of started with this one, and it's something I actually want to start doing more of.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think it's great when you can find kind of your signature texture and people know you when they hear you and they're like, okay, that production style, I've heard that before. Yeah, that's the same guy. You know, that's really cool. Well, where can people hear Johnny Humbucker?
Jimmy Humbucker. So
Jimmy Humbucker. I'm sorry, I got it wrong.
No worries. I'm actually everywhere. I have Reverb Nation, SoundCloud. I actually have stuff on iTunes now. So basically, if you just Google Jimmy Humbucker, you'll probably find most of my stuff on kind of like consistently. It's the one I consistently update is my Bandcamp.
Okay.
So it's jimmyhumbuckerofficial.bandcamp.com. So that one is kind of the one I update more frequently, like my actual professional work. But yeah, you can also find me on like iTunes. You just like search like Jimmy Humbucker. It's JIMMY Humbucker.
Cool.
HUMBUCKER. So yeah.
I'll put links to all that stuff in the show notes too, just so people can find it easily at the Libsyn page, Tourette's podcast.libsyn.com. You know, if there's one thing that you want to say to listeners about the sort of value of connecting with other people who have Tourette syndrome, or something that you think is misunderstood in greater society about what you go through with Tourette syndrome or with your comorbidities, just I'll give you the floor. Anything you want to say?
Well, I mean, for me, my comorbidity is a daily struggle. Like I'm kind of even going through it as we speak with several things. Like it makes me like I'm just really anxious like all the time, and it's like super anxious about a lot of different things that I can't really even like consciously think about, or sometimes I don't even know why I'm anxious. I'm just like anxious, and a lot of that I think has to do with just like kind of like my situation, just the general kind of all the comorbidities I have and the Tourette's on top of it, and all the mixture of all these things just kind of makes me just naturally anxious like all the time. That's kind of like my theory at least. And plus like right now I even kind of get nervous like talking with people and stuff.
It doesn't show, man. It does not show.
Oh, thanks. I guess what I want to say to people about Tourette's, I mean, it's a misunderstood disorder, and there's, you know, like you're not going to know everything about it maybe in your life. Your whole life could go by and they might not even find everything about it. But as long as like you're kind of like, you know, living your life kind of the same way as everyone else, and kind of like it's kind of, you don't need to let it kind of define you. I mean, it kind of makes me who you are in a way. At least it's made me who I am. My comorbidity and my Tourette's. But it's not really an excuse to like, you know, not live a normal life. I guess that's kind of my 2 cents.
Thanks for listening. Thanks, Simon, so much for being a part of this. Weigh in by email. If you have a response to anything Simon brought up on this episode, you can get with me at tourettespodcast@gmail.com. Better yet, hit up the Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook. And let's break the 100-member mark, and maybe we have by the time this episode comes out. I think it's 96, the last time I looked about 10 minutes ago. In which case, if we have passed the 100 mark, then we're celebrating or something. I don't know, but really happy with how that's gone either way. Again, we just launched the discussion group this season, and it's been a really nice resource that Sophia has put together here. Oh, and by the way, I almost forgot. Check out what I think is still the latest episode of the Sensory Matters podcast, on which Sophia is the guest. Yes, she's going to be on here soon on the Tourette's podcast soon to talk about her background with TS, but her interview on the Sensory Matters podcast is really multidimensional. The host asks really great questions, and we get to know Sophia. So please check that out. I'll link to it in the show notes to this episode at tourettespodcast.libsyn.com. Let's talk in the meantime and work our way up to episode 12 of season 2, which may be next week. There's the Thanksgiving travel and all that stuff. There's some unknown variables kind of out there in my life right now as far as what next week looks like, but I'm going to try to have it out, and if not, I'll make it up to you, but I'm not going to say anything either way yet. I just know I'm going to be doing some traveling, but Thanks again for everything, all the listeners, new and old. Talk to you again really soon. This is Ben.